third-party planners. So I'm just going to start out by asking, well, what is value-added tax? And VAT is a tax charged on most goods and services purchased in Europe. It's normally included in the price you're quoted and is not an add-on like sales taxes in the USA. So sometimes you would not know precisely how much of what you're being quoted is tax versus the actual price of the good or service. There are different rates in different countries. Some countries have multiple rates. Monaco is an example of that, where they charge 10% on F&B and sleeping rooms and 20% on other things like venue rentals and audiovisual. Most corporations are eligible to reclaim VAT in the parts of Europe that allow it. One exception is the insurance, banking, and financial services industry. As Lucy mentioned, Monaco is one of 2 destinations where insurance is eligible, the other being Germany. Also, nonprofits, they usually, when they are in Europe, they're holding some sort of member conference where they do charge an attendee fee, and because that fee is charged, they will not then be eligible for a VAT reclaim. And in fact, nonprofits are not eligible in most destinations. The 2 exceptions are the UK and Germany, but they have to prove that they're a business and have to have some revenues generated from commercial activities. Also, corporate sponsors of conferences who charge an attendee fee would likewise not be eligible. Third-party planners are not eligible even if they are making the payments and doing the contracting. They are not the company consuming the goods and services purchased, and of course they will be reimbursed by the end-user client as part of the cost of the program. So the end-user is the one that has no one to pass the VAT on to, and they're the eligible party for the refund. Purpose of travel is another important piece of eligibility. Most of the time, meetings, no-fee conferences, trade shows, product launches, plant visits, and in many places, incentives are eligible to get a VAT refund. The types of expenses do vary from country to country. Typical ones are hotel rooms, F&B, venue rental, business entertainment, AV, professional services, transportation. For example, transportation is not refundable in Monaco or France. Room gifts, you can't reclaim on those in any country. Also, VAT may be apportioned on certain expenses according to the percentage of spouses and guests that may be along. There's a lot of good reasons to pursue a VAT reclaim, and I've listed out some here. First of all, the end user does have a right to pursue these funds. It's also for third-party planners a value-added service that you can offer your client and should be part of due diligence when looking at European destinations. Also, it can help you in a competitive bid situation if you don't want to be the company that does not bring it up, put it that way. Also, a client may be able to afford a more expensive destination when you think of going somewhere where VAT is refundable. And although it reduces the cost of the program for your end user, it won't adversely affect the money that they're spending with you. So also, again, for third-party planners to be able to present a client with a reclaim check is a pretty nice thing to be able to do. And also, you won't have a client coming back asking you later, when it's too late, why you didn't pursue a refund. So those are just some good reasons to be aware of VAT reclaim. Also, I get asked at what point in the process should this be addressed. In some companies I'm working with purchasing, sometimes it's operations. Because there is a requirement for a certain type of invoice, there does need to be some advance notice given to suppliers. And also suppliers in different industries such as hotels and DMCs are required to do things a different way. Hotels do have to issue VAT invoices. They're a land-based service, meaning that they are selling the actual service or product that they sell, and they're not a third party like a DMC is. So DMC's under some slightly different rules, and I will tell you that right now it's pretty much chaos in Europe, because when the European Union makes legislative changes to VAT rules, they still leave it up to every country to interpret those rules, and so you get a host of different ideas of when VAT should be charged and when it shouldn't be and on what services. So that's, I'm not going to go into specifics, but I can tell you that Monaco, they do, the DMCs do issue VAT invoices, and a VAT invoice is an invoice that actually breaks out the value-added tax by service, so that at the bottom it will say, here are all your services at 5%, here's the services at 10, here's how much VAT at 20, so that it's pretty apparent how much VAT was incurred, and it's right there on the invoice. And so if I'm dealing with people at purchasing, sometimes things can be put into supplier contracts at the time that those are drawn up. It is harder to get cooperation after the fact, and by that I mean either after the program's operated or when you're when the invoices have already been issued. So the main thing, though, is that the final VAT invoice has to be issued in the end user's name and address, legal entity name, so that the documentation that the end user has had to fill out, the name and address used there has to be on the final invoice. And that's because they are the ones who are going to be reclaiming the VAT, so we can't have a third party or a second invoicee on an invoice. And it may sound risky, but these suppliers are very well versed, and they know that those invoices are still going to go back to you, the planner, for reconciliation and payment. The documentation that's required, that does, once again, differ by country, but there's a couple things you're always going to see. One is our application, which is pretty simple. The first page is basically kind of, you know, who is the end user, what did they do, not too complicated. The second page is our terms and conditions. Our fee is 25% of whatever we recover. Therefore, if we don't recover, we are not paid. So it's a contingent fee. And the other one, in this case, there's usually an authority form, because the tax office has to know that we have permission to get these funds for the end user. This is an example of Monaco letter of authority, where the end user would fill out the top two lines on the far left side, and we would take care of the rest. It also has to be notarized at the same time. So the other item that we need besides the final VAT invoice is a list of the people who traveled, and this is essentially, if you said you had 100 people incur these costs, they would just need to see 100 names. It doesn't have any more detail to it than that, first and last names. The other thing about invoices, since we work with so many of the same suppliers over and over, we know the type of invoices that they issue in terms of whether they do a nice, clean electronic invoice that we can print off on European-sized paper and it will be like an original, versus hotels and such that use a certain type of stationery where we would have to actually get the hard copy from the hotel. And we can help secure those if you are reconciling and paying off electronic that we can't use for reclaim. We would, quite often we are talking to hotel credit departments and getting, with your permission, the final in a hard copy form that is sent directly from the hotel to our UK office, which is where we do file our claims from. So we are able to assist in that if we need to. The other thing, these are just you know, less important, but the filing deadlines, most of Europe, it's a 6 months after the calendar year in which the invoices were issued. So right now, any program that traveled in 2015 and had 2015 dated invoices, those would have to be filed before June 30th of this year. The one exception to that is the UK. They use a July 1 fiscal year. Therefore, everything that traveled in the last half of last year and the first half of this year would be filed by the end of this year. But that's just, we rarely really run into deadline issues. Obviously, things that are, programs that are run later in the prior year, you just have to keep an eye out, because I know it takes a month or two sometimes for these invoices to get reconciled and paid. Also, the approval times vary by country. It's typically 6 to 12 months after the filing date. France is the quickest at 6. Germany, I say 12 optimistically. It can take a lot longer than that. So it's something that is pretty much gravy and not really to be counted on as an account receivable until you see it. The refunds are actually issued to us, to our Euro or British Pound account. We net out our fee. We convert to either U.S., Canadian, or whatever the client wants for currency. We, if it's not USD, then we would send a wire. If it is USD, we would actually write a check to the end user, but we'd send it to the planner, if it was a third-party planner, to present to the client as their value-added service. And just as a little illustration of what kind of money can be saved, of course it really obviously depends on the budget and the types of expenses, but in this example where you're looking at room VAT, meal VAT, AV rental, meeting room rental, entertainment, and professional services, the VAT on the right-hand side, this is how much has been backed out. You can see in this illustration it works out to be about 10% of those costs. Obviously, you may have more costs. You'll have probably transportation, which we can't refund on, and like we mentioned, the room gifts and other things like that. But most of the big things that you spend on, you can get a refund on. Again, does differ from country to country, and this illustration does not back out our fee, so this is sort of a gross look at what typical savings might be. Just keep in mind that, you know, when you do get a quote from a supplier, they're going to include the VAT. It's going to be a VAT inclusive. And so it's not that simple that you take those numbers and you just back out, you know, 10% from your hotel room. Because it's that VAT is already part of that price, then you're taking the 10% of the room cost plus the VAT, so you're overstating. So what we have on our website is we have different worksheets for different countries where you can insert your figures and then it'll give you a ballpark of what that VAT might be. Because in some cases you might want to use that as a carrot, you know, to say to the client, even though they're usually delighted to find out there's a refund opportunity, some of the bigger corporations may want to know, well, you know, if I have to sign 2 pieces of paper, then, you know, let's see if it's worth it and, you know, what's a ballpark. I always say, you know, don't quote something at the high end, kind of temper it, because when you do get the refund, you don't want it to be substantially different than the estimate that you give, and you certainly don't want it to be lower. So that's just a caution on using that. And again, this does not have our fee deducted from it anyway, either. Some other reasons to outsource this, I think you can understand that the tax laws are a bit complicated and you can't just Google it and figure out how to do it. And what the laws say and how they're interpreted, you know, are not always the same thing. So the real key and expertise that we offer is being able to know how are things interpreted in Monaco, for example. Sure, we have to have the documents and we have to have the invoices correct and we have to know how to prepare and file the claim, but we also have to be pretty knowledgeable about all of these legislations. And I mean, when things change, we usually have DMCs coming to us and saying, okay, what does this mean for us? and we've been a pioneer in that, trying to figure out how to interpret these things and still leave this door open for VAT reclaim. So it's something that you could try to study day and night, but unless you're actively filing claims, you're really not going to know. And that's the downside of it too, is that when they do decide to change an interpretation, they don't send us out some bulletin on that. They just start rejecting certain things, and that's how you find out. We have been reclaiming VAT for over 25 years, and we have always specialized in groups, which is why we work a lot with third-party planners. As I mentioned, we do have a thorough understanding and working knowledge of the VAT legislation in those countries where we file claims, but we're also well acquainted with the DMCs and hotels. And we do get referrals, and they're not going to do that unless they think we can be trusted with that information. One of the things I send out a lot is this VAT reclaim guideline. I've highlighted Monaco on here, but as you can see, there are some other opportunities. Incentives are eligible in certain places and not in others, and like I said, there's different nuances with every country, which is why if you are looking at a particular destination in Europe, you should contact me. I can tell you exactly what's going on at that point in time, and that's why I'm here, and I'm always happy to do that. And again, I have these documents in emailable form if there's anything that you want to see. And I'm also at IMEX every year, and I do exhibit with Monaco, and it's a great place for reclaim, and in fact, that's our leading destination. So with that, I will see if you all have questions, anything specific that you want to talk about that I didn't cover.
Thanks, Nancy. Yes, here's your email, info@cei-vat.com. And again, this is being recorded and will be put on our website. So you can also contact me to get a recording of this webinar. Thanks so much, Nancy.
Thank you.
I don't have questions on my side, and they can also email you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. That's it for today. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Yes,
Bye,
thank
everyone.
You. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Nancy. Bye.